A couple weeks ago, I finally joined in the Ludum Dare 46 challenge, where you make a game in about 2 weeks, but most of you guys already know what that is. Before we get right into this video, I just want to plug our Patreon. It's for our project Windshire, the action-adventure RPG project that we're all working on. If you're interested in supporting the game and seeing in-depth development logs of the game and also new features that are coming out, go to the Patreon and just become a patron. You get a bunch of cool features, like on our Discord you get a brand new role that's nice and blue. In addition, you also get a private chat with the developers in our Discord, which is very exclusive, only Patreon people get to see it. In addition, we get brand new renders for our Patreon page every single time a new model for the game comes out, so you guys see it first before anybody else in the world. And if you want to pay for one of the more expensive features, you get cool rewards like naming an NPC or a town. So if you guys do decide to go out and become a patron, we want to give you guys a big thank you. It helps our development team a ton and it just makes everything so much easier for us, so thank you guys. Anyways, let's get right back into the video. So this Ludum Dare started on April 17th of 2020. It started around 9 p.m. my time, and that was probably a perfect time because I recently just got done finishing up everything I had to that day, and I finally got the theme around 11 o'clock when I was free. I kind of forgot about the jam until about 10:30, and I kind of panicked and decided I wanted to join it, so then I just hopped right in and started development. The theme was staying alive, and I instantly thought of plants. Plants, you gotta keep them alive, water them, and stuff like that. And I also thought of this Bracky's game jam that he did a couple years ago about him making a kind of a cooking mama type game where you and a friend have to balance planting and making food and stuff like that, and I thought that was really cool. I've always wanted to make one of those types of games, but I didn't really know how to do local co-op, so I wanted to stray away from that. But the biggest thing I did want to do is have some type of farming mechanic. I didn't want to do just a farmer mechanic because I knew that's kind of the generic thing that most people go to, so I decided to kind of make the whole game about just keeping your family alive. You're in this post-apocalyptic world where you're trying to be a farmer with these evil farmers trying to grab your crops while you're trying to feed your family. So I started around 11 o'clock, and I think that day I worked until about 1:30 a.m. I was making a bunch of movement and basic combat manager script that I kind of do for all my games. So once I finished that up, I kind of went to bed that night, and that's all I really did on the first night. The second night was also a pretty late night start. I started around 11 or about 10 p.m. that night because I actually had some stuff to do over the daytime, so I couldn't work on the game at all. The one thing I did do was actually start streaming my game progress. I started on a farming mechanic right as I could. I wanted this to be a simple mechanic where you basically plant a piece of seed or just a seed, and then you just kind of water it until it goes through stages. Was basically just on a simple randomized timer that would just go and change up the sprite every so often, and once it hits that third stage it would be able to be harvested and you'll be able to go over there with your pitchfork and collect it. And then once from there, I didn't really know what to do. You could feed it straight to the family for about 5 health points, and later that night I actually got a suggestion by my chat. It was to make a furnace where you could actually bake the wheat into bread, and that's exactly what I did. I made a campfire that you can place the wheat on, and a couple seconds later you can actually bake it into bread. The one thing they also suggested was to actually make it a bit harder and make it so you can burn the bread, and this would actually reduce its hunger points to only 1 instead of the 10 you can get from the bread. So this was actually a really fun balancing act where you had to balance enemies, bread, and crops, and your family and stuff like that. You had to manage a lot in the game, and I thought that's what made it really fun. So honestly, that's kind of what I ended up finishing up on night 2. I had one more night, but I had my brother's birthday that day, so again I couldn't work on it as much as I wanted to. But the biggest thing I had to do was make AI, so I got started around 3 or 4 p.m. that day, and I started streaming right away. And the one thing I really wanted to do was make a finite state machine for the AI because I wanted a couple of different states. I want them to be pursuing the enemy or the target, and I want them to be able to take the crop away and stuff like that. So I made a simple finite state machine using enums, and it worked pretty well for the most part. I think I used a switch case to determine what I want to do in each state, but I'm not exactly sure. It's been about a month. But if you guys are interested in seeing what I did for the AI, you can check out my live stream. It took me about a couple hours. I'm not exactly sure how long, but I know I had a ton of issues with the enemies attacking the player. With the whole pitchfork facing towards the correct target, it kind of bugs out now, where it floats away from the actual enemy itself and just kind of floats around it, but it still follows the enemy, so it's really weird. In addition to that, the other things I did manage to do that day was kind of add a blood particle effect and a couple of other cute little effects to make attacking feel more impactful. The other thing I did right before the deadline was actually make a couple of different enemies, and instead of making different sprites, I did the big boy decision and just resized the actual prefab. So instead of having a scale of 1, the bigger one with more health has a scale of 1.5, and the ones that are a little faster but are only about a 1 hit is only about a scale of 1.7. So that's how you make different types of variations without having to do any work basically, except just change some numbers. In addition to that, I wanted a round counter that kind of would display what round you get to at the end. I did this really simply by basically just setting up max enemies and a kind of like a spawner entity, which would keep track of how many enemies left and how many enemies could spawn that round, and then just increment the actual round by 1 every time enemies left went to 0. And that's all I really did on the last day. I know that I didn't get too much done, but it took me about 5 hours. I couldn't get the sound effects and music working at all. It just kept bugging out, so I just decided to scrap it and just focus on getting my game submitted. I submitted my game with about 3 or 5 minutes left into the submission deadline, so I was really happy about that. I was honestly shaking towards the end. I was really panicked, and it was just really fun, honestly. So I love the experience, and I'm probably going to join again at another date. So that's all I really did for Ludum Dare. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't. And thank you to our Patreon supporters, Deathstroke and Inconspicuous. We finally got our second Patreon, Deathstroke, last night, so I'm really happy about that, and thank you for joining the team. Hopefully you're enjoying the new benefits you got with the whole Patreon page and seeing more in-depth development posts about Windshire. So if anyone is interested in that, go check it out in the description below. But I'll see you guys on Tuesday's video.